Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's army says 6 civilians, including 2 girls, have been wounded in another violation of line of control by India. The military's media wing said Indian troops targeted civilian population in Nikyal, Sharda, Dudnial and Shakut sectors by using heavy artillery. The military said Pakistan's troops responded befittingly to the aggression. It said forces targeted Indian posts which were indiscriminately firing on civilians along the LOC in Azad Kashmir. It said Indian army has committed 708 ceasefire violations, murdering 2 civilians and wounding 42 others in current year so far. The violation comes a day after Pakistan army shot down an Indian military's drone along the line of control. For more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General retired Amjad Shoaib. Thank you for your time. Indian forces have wounded 6 civilians resorting to another violation at LOC, and they are they, do you think, deliberately targeting the civilians?
I think this is very, very unfortunate when all the countries in the world, they are fighting this endemic of corona. We are having this violence on our LOC, in spite of the fact that United Nations Secretary General has specifically requested all the countries to stop violence, even on the borders or within the country. The problem is that they are definitely, intentionally, they are targeting the civilians because they want to project a picture. They want to, in fact, put across a narrative to the rest of the world that whatever is going on in Kashmir, if you recall, for the last about 10 days, we have had some 3 large-scale confrontations with the freedom fighters and also with the Indian Army. And the Indian Army has suffered huge losses. Because of that, now they may be planning to launch some bigger operation within Kashmir. And in order to divert the attention of the international community, at the same time to find a reason to do that, they are now committing such type of violations, and then telling the international community that it is Pakistan which has been launching pads on the other side, and they are infiltrating their people, and they are the ones who are creating some problem in Kashmir. As a matter of fact, the entire leadership of Kashmir is now they are in the prison. They have been imprisoned. Not only that, but many young student leaders and many other young men, something like about 7,500 people are behind the bars, without any reason, without any charge. And at the same time, there's a lockdown. The houses are searched. The houses are put on fire. Such like atrocities are there. And the Indians, they know that all those who have been martyred there, they are Kashmiris, their relatives are there, they have taken over their dead bodies, they have buried them ceremoniously. All these things are there. But to the international community, they will still say that it is Pakistan which is infiltrating the people and they are creating a situation. So that is why, in spite of the Secretary General's concern and his appeal that violence should be stopped, they are resorting to this kind of thing.
Do you think that ceasefire violations at LOC from India have increased after Narendra Modi took over?
There is another very important factor which we must keep in mind, that before Modi took over power in India, we didn't have too many violations on the LOC. There were sometimes, there used to be, but then normally the LOC used to be calm. Modi is a man who basically is a terrorist, and his mentality is totally has been taken over by RSS ideology, in which violence is the answer for everything. So he is resorting, he has that hatred towards the Muslims, he has that hatred towards Pakistan. So they have nothing to show to their own people because of the deteriorating condition within India. So that helps him that whenever he wants to gain some political mileage, he would resort to this type of violation and such tactics against Pakistan or against the Kashmiris on our side. And that is how he will try to close the ranks within the country. So politically, I think he has been able to build up his career on such like things, and he would like to maintain that kind of political gain by doing such like of atrocities against the Kashmiris and against the Kashmiris on our side. They are civilians, and not another very important thing. From Pakistan side, the army is giving a befitting reply, and that is their duty. They are doing it all right. But this, this whole the whole issue should be brought to the international community, to the knowledge of the international community. We should write to the Secretary General of the United Nations. At the same time, the ambassadors of various countries, they are there in Pakistan, they should be briefed. There is a need to launch a diplomatic offensive at this time so that the international community should realize that Indians, in spite of the fact that international community and the entire world is under the grip of this pandemic of corona, Indians are still not sparing any moment to really resort to violence and create problems for the people of Pakistan, the people of Kashmir, and for their own people.
General Shoaib, what about Pakistan's response on the ground when there are civilians on the other side? And obviously Pakistan doesn't want to inflict any sort of damage on those civilians.
See, this is a limitation. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, during the peacetime, because we know the Indian mentality, we keep on working and keep on registering, or you can say keep on working the technical data about their various posts on the Indian side, so that we can ultimately, if there is a need to engage, we should be able to engage them very accurately. And this is what we are doing. We are very selective, and we pinpoint the targets and engage. So it is our earnest desire and also explicit effort not to really target the civilian population, and to a great extent we remain successful in that. Sometimes there are problems, and but these are absolutely unintentional if there is any loss on the other side. Usually it is the loss, and if you really review our previous claims about the damage to the Indian side, you will realize that it is mostly in almost in every case, these are the Indian soldiers who have suffered. Indian equipment has been destroyed. Their hospitals have been, in certain cases, their field hospitals, they have been requesting the people to come forward and donate blood for the wounded and for the people who have suffered casualties. So this is what is going on, and we perhaps are mindful of our duty and mindful of our people. We consider that the population on the other side of the LOC in Kashmir is primarily they are Pakistani citizens. Because Kashmir belongs to Pakistan, then there are citizens. It's a different question that they are under occupation by the Indian forces. But they are our citizens, and we have a duty, sacred duty, to protect their lives.
Lieutenant General Retired Amjad Shoaib, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate that. And to talk more about this, we are joined by Major General Retired Ijaz Awana. Thank you for your time as well. What is India trying to achieve from its violations at the LOC, but deliberately targeting the civilians?
Yes, I think it's a very deliberate violation of ceasefire understanding between the two countries. And this is not the first time. I think there have been more than 3,000 violations in the last 1 year. Now, they are doing it deliberately for two reasons. One, that there is a growing pressure on India from the UN Secretary General, in which he has demanded that they should ease off the clampdown and sanctions on the people of occupied Kashmir, so that the health workers can get an access to them and they can stay informed to fight against COVID-19. And second, same appeal was made worldwide by the Secretary General that all hostilities across the globe should cease, and we must create space for fight against COVID-19. Now, under these two circumstances, India is coming under a lot of pressure because they are not easing off the sanctions and lockdown situation in occupied Kashmir. Now, to ward off that pressure, they have resorted to the violation, and they are again repeating their old rhetoric and narrative of involvement of Pakistan in internal affairs of Kashmir. So they are trying to tell the world that there is some interference, some infiltration, some kind of involvement of Pakistan in Kashmir. So that's why they are responding, which is a nonsensical argument, and there is no justification on ground.
So is it trying to take advantage of a time when international community is focused on fighting COVID-19 pandemic?
India is already taking advantage of the prevailing situation across the globe because of this COVID-19. America is looking inward, UK, United Kingdom, and China, and all the powerful countries in the world, they are looking inward because each and every one of them is affected by COVID-19. So there is unfortunately a space created where people are not looking towards Kashmir issue in particular, but United Nations Secretary General, since he is sitting in an organization or heading an organization where they have to look at the humanitarian concern. The Prime Minister of Pakistan had also made an appeal for the humanitarian situation which is worsening in Kashmir. Because of that, the statement came. So they'll not be able to divert the attention, but at the same time, they will not come under a heavy pressure from the big powers in the world. So there is a space which they are trying to utilize, and they are trying to silence the demand of the Secretary General of United Nations for easing of pressure in Kashmir.
Major General retired Ijaz Awana, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate that. It's a time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Pakistan, Minister of Planning and Development Asad Umar says the country may start easing restrictions from 15th of April, but the final decision to lift the lockdown introduced to contain the novel coronavirus will be made on Monday. Speaking in Islamabad, he said the outbreak has had a major impact on Pakistan's economy. Umar said Pakistan also needed to conduct mass testing and contact tracing of those tested positive. The minister said recommendations will be presented before the Premier regarding the country's measures against the virus. He said they will constitute a unified plan to move forward. There are over 4,900 confirmed coronavirus cases in the country, with 77 deaths and 762 recoveries. In Spain, the daily death rate from COVID-19 has fallen to a 19-day low with 510 fatalities, bringing the toll to over 16,000. The global number of infections has crossed to 1.7 million with over 100,000 deaths. For more in this report.
The number of confirmed cases in the Netherlands rose by over 1,316 to 24,413 with 132 new deaths. The country's cumulative death toll is now 2,643. Iran has reported 125 new deaths, increasing the tally to over 4,300. In Italy, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte extended a countrywide lockdown until the 3rd of May to contain the epidemic. The coronavirus pandemic has so far claimed nearly 19,000 lives in Italy. The death toll from the coronavirus in the UK has risen by 917 to 9,875 people. Reportedly, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has started short walks after he was moved out of intensive care. With the fourth most cases in the world, France reported nearly 1,000 cases. Switzerland's death toll from the coronavirus has reached 831, while the number of confirmed cases increased to 24,900. Russia has reported 1,667 new cases, bringing the national tally to 13,584, whereas the death toll stood at 106.
Over 377,000 people have recovered from new coronavirus infection worldwide. China has the highest number with more than 77,800 recovered people. Other countries with the most recoveries are Spain with over 55,000 and Germany with nearly 54,000. Countries in Europe are now seeing a decrease in the rate of new infections. In the Middle East, Oman, Kuwait and UAE have also reported hundreds of people recovering from COVID-19. A U.S. citizen, 104-year-old William Lefties is among many other elderlies across the world who have recovered from COVID-19 illness. Lefties lived through the Spanish flu, the Great Depression and the World War II. A 101-year-old man in Italy's Rimini is back at home with his family after beating the infection. A British veteran of World War II has also been discharged from the hospital in South Yorkshire after recovering. 93-year-old Ali Gunduz in Istanbul was discharged from the hospital after recovering following 10 days of treatment. These latest reports of elderly patients surviving the outbreak have motivated health workers and young people to continue battling the virus. Nearly 379,000 people have recovered from the infection worldwide. The U.S. has recorded the world's highest daily death toll from COVID-19 with over 2,100 fatalities. The worldwide death toll has crossed 100,000 with nearly 1.7 million infections. More in this report.
The U.S. has set a new record of daily deaths, while infection cases in the country exceed 500,000. President Donald Trump says he thinks the U.S. will lose fewer than initially projected 100,000 lives to COVID-19. Trump says he will soon create a council to focus on reopening the country after the worst phase of the pandemic is over. Meanwhile, Pakistan Consul spokesperson Zubia Masood said over 100 Pakistani nationals have died in New York and New Jersey region. New York remains the epicenter of the outbreak in the U.S., with more people being buried in mass graves.
It's any kind of person who passes away. This is not a new procedure, is what I'm trying to make clear to you, that this is, it's a sad topic. Imagine anyone who passes away and there's no one there to claim the body. This has been the truth for generations. So anyone who is passing away now from any cause, that's what's happening. But more people are passing away, obviously, in large measure because of COVID.
In Turkey, the government has imposed a 2-day curfew in 31 provinces after recording more than 1,000 deaths and over 47,000 infections. The announcement made just 2 hours before the curfew was due to start sparked panic buying and crowd shoppers. Elsewhere, Ireland extended its stay-at-home coronavirus restrictions until May 5th. Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said curbs have significantly slowed the spread of the outbreak, but more work is required to end it.
We need to persevere, and we need to maintain our discipline and resolve. The restrictions we introduced 2 weeks ago were set to expire on Sunday. Today, the expert recommendation is to extend them for a further 3 weeks until Tuesday, May 5th. The government has accepted this recommendation.
Meanwhile, China has reported 46 new coronavirus cases, of which 42 are imported ones. Authorities say they are trying to head off a second wave of infections as curbs on cities and travel are lifted.
The Taliban say they have held talks with the U.S. military delegation headed by General Austin S. Miller over the implementation of Doha deal. The two sides signed a peace agreement in February to end almost 2-decade-long war in Afghanistan. The group's spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said two sides discussed the reduction of violence in different areas of Afghanistan. The spokesperson said the meeting focused on attacks and ambushes being carried out in non-combat areas. Shaheen said political bureau board of the group called for its prevention during the meeting in Doha. The meeting held days after the Taliban called the negotiation team back from Kabul for prisoners exchange with the Afghan government. The rights body Amnesty International has asked Afghan government to release women prisoners on priority basis. Earlier, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani ordered release of inmates amid COVID-19 threat. In a statement, the rights body said 10 days have been passed since Ghani ordered release of the prisoners, but nothing has happened. It said the women prisoners are particularly at risk as many of them have their children in jails. The Amnesty said there is ongoing discrimination against women in general in Afghanistan, which makes them least important. It said rights groups have pointed out many women prisoners have not committed serious crimes. The political uncertainty persists in Afghanistan as the meetings of the prominent political leaders have ended with no results. Former Chief Executive's office said top politicians have failed to meet a 5-day deadline to end the rift between President Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah. Abdullah's team blamed Ghani for not showing flexibility and not understanding the current situation in the country. The spokesperson said Abdullah will soon announce his cabinet. Earlier, President Ghani offered Abdullah to head the Peace Council for intra-Afghan talks with the Taliban. In Yemen, a court run by the Houthi rebels has sentenced 4 journalists to death after their conviction on spying charges in rebel-held Sana'a. The 4 were among a group of 10 journalists who were detained by the rebels in 2015 and accused of collaborating with the Saudi-led coalition. The court also convicted the other 6 journalists on similar charges, but ordered their release after time served. The journalist lawyer said the Houthis didn't allow defense lawyers to attend the trial. Last year, Amnesty International called the charges trumped up. The rights group said the detained reporters had been beaten, deprived of water, and forced to hold cinder blocks for several hours. Yemen has been convulsed by civil war since 2014 when the Houthis took control of the country's north, including Sana'a. Syria says Turkey-backed rebels have renewed their attacks on civilians in the northern countryside of Aleppo province. State media said the rebels fired artillery shells in the vicinity. It said the rebel-supporting mercenaries raided several areas in the surroundings of Tal Rifat city. The outlet said the attacks caused severe damages to civilian infrastructure and public facilities. No human casualties were reported after the attacks. Syria has blamed the rebels for breaking the cessation of hostilities agreement between Turkey and Russia. The US has placed a $10 million bounty on Iraqi Hezbollah's top military commander, Sheikh Mohammed al-Qatarani. In a statement, the State Department claimed Qatarani is leading the political coordination of Iran-aligned paramilitary groups. The statement said Qatarani took charge after Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was killed in a US drone strike in January. It charged him of facilitating militant groups who suppress protests, attack diplomatic missions, and engage in organized criminal activity. The State Department said placing a bounty on him was part of an effort to disrupt Hezbollah's financial mechanisms. In 2013, the US branded Qatarani as a global terrorist, accusing him of funding armed groups in Iraq. Washington also accused him of transporting Iraqi fighters to Syria to join President Bashar al-Assad's effort to put down a revolt against his rule. In India, workers' protests against COVID-19 lockdown turned violent in the western state of Gujarat. Millions of migrant workers are facing hunger after New Delhi announced a sudden 21-day-long curfew last month. The police said workers blocked the roads, burned tires, and pelted stones on the security officials in Surat city. They said migrants are demanding to go home in other states while fearing extension in the clampdown. Meanwhile, carrying communal sentiments, Uttar Pradesh police declared 20 Muslim patients without testing them. Muslims community leaders said many of nominated are not even in the UP and were targeted for having links with the Tablighi Jamaat. India has recorded 249 deaths and over 7,500 virus infections across the country. Health authorities in Middle Eastern countries have reported new cases of novel coronavirus on Saturday. Since appearing in China last December, the virus has spread to at least 185 countries and regions. For more in this report.
Saudi Arabia has announced 382 new cases of the coronavirus, bringing the total number in the kingdom to 4,033. The UAE reported 170 recoveries, bringing the total number to 588. While the tally of infections rose to 3,736. Qatar's Ministry of Health recorded 216 new cases, raising the total number of cases in the country to 2,512. Kuwait's Health Ministry confirmed 116 new cases, taking the total to 1,154, including 113 recoveries. Lebanon registered 10 new cases over the past 24 hours, bringing the total number to 619, while the death toll stands at 20. Oman reported the third coronavirus death and 62 new cases, pushing the total to 546. Palestine reported another case of the fatal disease, raising the total to 109. The death toll in the occupied territories stands at 2.
A fire has engulfed large parts of prison in Russia's Siberia region following a riot by inmates who accused guards of mistreatment. Security forces have sealed off the area around the high-security penal colony in Angarsk. There are reports of casualties, but the number is unclear. Russia's penal service said inmates attacked a guard who had to be taken to the hospital. Officials said the unrest is under control and authorities have opened an investigation. Human rights groups said a rioting broke out after an inmate was beaten by a prison officer. Chad's President Idris Deby says the National Army won't take part in operations beyond the country's borders any longer. He was speaking at an event marking the end to an anti-Boko Haram offensive. President Deby said Chad has felt alone in the fight against Boko Haram since the government launched the operation. He said the government soldiers have died for Lake Chad and the Sahel. The president said Chad's military will not become part of an external military operation in the future. This is a potential blow to the joint anti-terror offensives in the conflict-ridden Sahel region, which are led by France. Militants carried out the region's deadliest attack in March, killing about 100 Chadian soldiers in an ambush. President Donald Trump has ordered visa sanctions against countries that do not accept their citizens deported from the U.S. The White House memorandum says the U.S. must carry out the deportation of foreign nationals who violate the country's laws. It said the ban will be imposed if a country delays accepting its nationals who are health risks for Americans. The Secretary of Homeland Security has been directed to inform the Secretary of State about such instances. Within 7 days, the State Department is required to initiate a plan to impose the sanctions. Sanctions will be lifted once Homeland Security certifies the host countries are accepting their nationals. The memorandum will expire on December 31st this year unless it is extended. The World Health Organization has warned countries against lifting restrictions introduced to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. Addressing a news conference, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the lifting of curbs could lead to a deadly resurgence. He said though the epidemic is slowing down in some EU states, there is an alarming acceleration in other countries. Ghebreyesus said the community transmission of the virus is increasing in 16 African countries. He said there is a lesson to learn from the pandemic for every country, even for those who believed they have advanced systems.
I think from this pandemic, we have to try to learn, focus on learning what the gaps are. This is not a message only for the developing world. This is a message even for the developed countries.
US-based watchdog Human Rights Watch says Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's policies are putting people in danger during the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, the body accused Bolsonaro of disseminating false information about the contagion. Human Rights Watch said Bolsonaro was sabotaging states and his own health ministry's efforts to contain the spread of the virus. The watchdog said leaders should provide people with accurate information to avoid preventable deaths, but Bolsonaro has been failing to do so. Bolsonaro has repeatedly shrugged off the gravity of the pandemic while comparing it to a little flu. Brazil has reported nearly 20,000 infection cases and over 1,000 deaths so far. In Uruguay, computer scientists have created a ventilator they say is easy to build and patent-free. With these ventilators in affordable price, scientists aim to help ease pressure on hospitals. More about these respirators in this report.
Influx of new coronavirus patients has stretched hospitals thin. In such times, Uruguayan scientists have designed a mechanical respirator that can be made with components widely available in the country.
Within our means here in Uruguay, I think the ventilators complies with the functions required by any intensivist caring for a patient. We gave it the finishing touches 2 nights ago to keep pressure not too high inside the lung, and it worked. We pulled it off.
Their invention, called the Charrua ventilator, can be manufactured by any person or company due to its patent-free schemes. Although, the team of scientists is still working on refining the device. They have already developed a prototype that is being tested on animals.
We were definitely pleased with our work. It is really fulfilling to have contributed, even if it is a small contribution. We hope they will not be used. If they do need to be used, hopefully we can make a positive contribution.
According to the Johns Hopkins University data, the South American country has nearly 500 new coronavirus cases, with 7 deaths so far.
Tech giants Apple and Google are jointly developing technology to alert people about their contacts with the coronavirus patients. In a statement, both the companies hope to initially help third-party contact tracing apps run efficiently. They said their method will use the smartphone's Bluetooth signals to determine who the owner had been in proximity. If one of those people later tested positive for the COVID-19, a warning will be sent to the original handset owner. They said no GPS location data or personal information will be recorded. US President Donald Trump said his administration will take a look at the plans announced by Apple and Google.
This isn't something we're going to look at it, certainly, and we know they've done that, and it's it's very new technology. It's very interesting, but a lot of people worry about it in terms of a person's freedom. We're going to take a look at that, a very strong look at it. We'll let you know pretty soon.
And I have another
brand new.
It has been 50 years since Apollo 13 safely returned to Earth. An oxygen tank explosion prevented the spacecraft from landing on the moon and put its 3-man crew in danger. More in this report.
2 days into the mission, Lovell and his fellow astronauts Jack Swigert and Fred Hayes were initially unaware of the seriousness of their situation. But soon Lovell realized the issue and told the mission control at Johnson Space Center in Texas, "Houston, we've had a problem." The Apollo 13 crew dealt with impossible odds for 5 days, rationing food and water, loss of cabin heat, and using the lunar module on the return trip to Earth. At the time, Apollo 13 mission director Chris Kraft said their only priority was to get the situation under control.
We have a serious problem in the command and service module. We appear to have had some kind of accident with in the region of the fuel cells and the oxygen tanks. We have not tried too much to reconstruct what has happened because we were more concerned at the moment for getting the situation under control.
Large crowds at New York's Grand Central Station watched the astronauts' successful landing in the Pacific and gave them a hero's welcome.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. The group of world's 20 biggest economies have vowed to take all the necessary and immediate measures to ensure energy markets stability. In a joint statement of energy ministers' virtual meeting, the bloc announced to form a focus group to monitor oil response measures. The statement said the countries will work closely with actors across the oil sector to make energy systems more adaptive and resilient. The G20 leaders committed to take all the necessary measures to ensure the energy security of systems and its uninterrupted flow. Meanwhile, Canada's Natural Resource Minister Seamus O'Regan has said a G20 is not where it needs to be on oil, but took huge step forward. He said the ministers agreed on need for price stability, but did not talk about numbers. The ministerial level meeting was at behest of the heads of states meeting of the group that took place in April 26. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has discussed the cutting oil output with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The Kremlin says both the leaders held a telephone conversation in an effort to reach stability of energy markets to support the global economy. The Kremlin said questions connected with talks in the OPEC framework were discussed during the call. The two sides agreed to continue Russian-Saudi contacts on this issue. Oil-producing countries and allies have agreed to cut oil output by 10 million barrels per day in May and June. On Friday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Putin positively assessed the agreements on oil production in the OPEC framework. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.